Now we will have a discussion session. Please let us know if you wish to speak, and please press the unmute button when you receive the unmute request. Mr. Kuber Chalice.
Hi everyone. Nice to talk to you again.
Any comment for any of the topics brought up today?
Yes, I've been listening to all my participant friends. As Habib noted that it's not only the fault of the journalist, that everyone is hoping that journalist is like God, he can do or she can do anything. It's not like that. I'll give you some examples. Like in Nepal, from March 29 to April 2nd, 4 days the government closed the whole schools and educational institutions across the country because there was a huge this dense fog and there was this air pollution. Despite the fact that since last 1 year there has been lockdown and there are less flow of vehicles, but still there was this air pollution. So this time everybody noticed, everybody, when it came to their children, then everybody noticed that this is very serious thing. So first thing, it's not only the responsibility of the journalists. Journalists have been writing maybe little or more in all of the countries. So in some countries, journalists might be writing more. In others, might be writing less, but they are writing. But still, until and unless the society understands the importance and the impact of the climate change, it will not give any result. So that's why I gave you this example that for 4 days, when all the schools across the country were closed, then people understood what is the severity of the climate change and the pollution. And second example is at the same time, this year was actually a very unlucky year for the whole world. So out of 77 districts, almost 73 districts of Nepal had forest fires and thousands, not one, two, thousands. And that also rang the bell in the society to the people, to the public policymakers, government, and everybody was thinking, now we have to do something. Now then, when this eye-opener to the incidents happened, then the people understood, the government understood, took it seriously, and it became the national agenda. And now the people are more serious about that. This is first. And second, in countries like Nepal, even in India, Bangladesh, almost all the LDCs, but except that also, there is a huge fight between development and environment. At the cost of development, at the cost of environment, or we do not need any development, but we protect environment. So this huge fight must be tackled by the journalists very practically and prudently. Otherwise, it will mislead the whole society and the country, because we cannot say no to the development and we cannot say no either to the environmental protection, the climate change and all these things. So it has to be balanced. And when reporting this, I see many a times problem in almost all the regional or global media. The Western media, they focus more on environmental protection. Very good. But when we, the third nations, so-called third nations, start constructing big airports or big hydropower, then they talk about this environmental protection. But when they were doing, nobody asked them. So this kind of questions will keep on rising. So that's why I think it's very important to strike balance between the environmental protection and development issues. And here, the role of journalists is much more crucial, and we have to keep a kind of way so that the development is not hindered and environmental protection is also taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to pass the microphone to Ms. Sabina Inderjit. anything you want to add? Miss Sabina Inderjet.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Any comments on any of the topics brought up today? Can you hear us?
Mrs. Tima,
Can you hear us? Okay.
may I ask you?
Sorry about the technical problem. We're going to move on to Mr. Ranjit Kumar, and then we will get back to her after the technical issue is solved. Mr. Ranjit Kumar, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hello. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
Am I audible?
Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm hearing you. And am I audible to you?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just have to make a short comment regarding the role of media in protecting this beautiful earth. You know, I would like to bring to your kind notice a huge glacial burst in the Indian hill state of Uttarakhand. This happened only 2 months ago, and there were several power projects that were completely damaged, flooded by glacial burst. The local media was writing about this, creating awareness among people, but the national media was ignoring all these issues, and the government was not paying heed to all these concerns. Happened, and it caused hundreds of lives were lost, properties were lost, the entire power projects were damaged. So I just like to point out towards this lack of awareness among people and lack of public pressure being created by media that was responsible for. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Habib Tomi. Mr. Tomi,
Yes.
anything you want to add?
Yeah, just a couple of things. This is one of the most interesting conferences we've had, and very, very important global issues. And we had, of course, lots of dreams and a lot of ambition. Hopefully, things will come true one day or the other, but we have to keep our feet on the ground. Regarding, for example, yesterday, because we did not really debate it, talking about the future of journalism after COVID-19, we had many hopes, etc., but we are sure now that journalism will never be the same after COVID-19. The system for journalists has really changed. Many journalists have lost their jobs. Many newspapers have shut down, and now everybody's going digital. So if we cannot adapt to the digital age, there's no way that we're going to attract readers, because readers do not want to do anything, do not have anything to do with the old values, what they call old values. They want new values. So we have to adapt. We should know how to include data, infographics, etc., in our presentations, in our reports. Otherwise, we're not going to sustain for a long time. Regarding climate change, the same thing. We have to be realistic. It's not one size fits all. You cannot ask countries with 1.3 billion citizens to behave like countries that have only 5 million people, for example, 6 million people, or countries that have a lot of resources with countries that have few resources. So, imposing climate change restrictions or attitudes from the countries that have on the countries that don't have is not fair. Is not fair at all. Like Kuber has said it so clearly a while ago, we have to understand that there are certain situations in certain countries, and things we as journalists, we have to engage people and scientists and policymakers together to make everything realistic locally, not because somebody else in another country, especially in a Western country, wants it that way, then we have to do it, unless we have solutions. So the best thing is to help us come up with solutions, not to threaten with sanctions or with anything else. So that's not fair. That's the point I wanted to clear. And we as journalists, we have a lot of responsibilities, but these have to be shared as well. Thank you and all the best. And thank you for all the beautiful and wonderful ideas we received from you throughout these 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we are moving on to Mr. Ashraf Elderly. Mr. Elderly?
Yes, thank you. Actually, I'd like to start my comment by comparing climate change issues globally and sports, which is something different, but I compare because I believe that the global climate issues are not taking the deserved attention by all fans of sports, which are very popular. You know, soccer has 4 billion fans. Cricket has 2.5 billion fans. Hockey, the same. Tennis, 1 billion, and so on. So why are all these billions are not taking interest in following climate change? Because the beginning of following climate issues, this is the interest that we need to offer the audience and the fans to move for eventually. The question is, how can we drag those billions, even hundreds of millions, to globally like issues and be interested in them?
Mr. Elderly. Oh, yeah. Sorry about the technical problem. Now we are moving on to Mr. Jamil Ahmad. Mr. Ahmad,
Yes,
can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you properly. Thank you for giving me the floor. It's not a question, rather a comment. I thought this is a valid point to share, because as climate change is a global issue, we all need to plan, design, and implement programs globally to address it. So I think all the speakers, participants, journalists, and media professionals of this World Journalist Conference 2021 South Korea, all are very resourceful personality. I have seen their profile. I suggest that we somehow create a network among ourselves so that we can, share our countrywide best practices and success stories among ourselves, and that will help us to, write reports in newspaper who are print journalists, and also those who are broadcast journalists and TV personalities like us. We can utilize those knowledge in television and online. So I suggest we are connected. I have just created a Facebook group, and several of us have added there already. So I welcome everyone to be connected so that we can learn from each other and can do well in this sector in the future days as well. Thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to pass the mic to Mr. Chang Daur. Any comments you want to make?
While I was preparing to speak for this conference, I happened to find a speech by Alan Ross Bridger. He was a former editor-in-chief in The Guardian in the UK, and he was talking to the Oxford Climate Society with the topic of the role of media in addressing climate change. I found his speech in YouTube. Let me repeat the title again so you can look up. The title is "The Role of Media in Addressing Climate Change." delivered by Alan Rossbridger, who was the former editor-in-chief of The Guardian in the UK. And in this speech, he actually introduced very interesting topics related to the role of journalism in climate change. Because as many of you know that The Guardian ran a campaign called Keep It in the Ground. It was the campaign by The Guardian for many years to really push the agenda of climate change. And they had a specific purpose to change some of the biggest independent foundations in the world to fund climate change. And while I was listening to his experience as the editor-in-chief of The Guardian for climate change, he raised the question that in this era of climate crisis, whether the journalism should stay exclusively for reporting as they have been doing in the past, or whether the media or journalism need to actively take the role of campaign in this climate era. And today I heard that from Sebastian Ayuanet, one of his suggestions is to take an activist approach for the media for climate change. Well, as a person working for an environmental campaign organization, I don't know whether if the media takes all campaign approaches, then my job is threatened. I'm just kidding. But I think this is a very good agenda for our discussion today, whether the media should stay mainly for reporting or the media journalism need to take an activist approach or campaign approach in the climate change. Today, I listened, some of the speakers are saying that the media need to still stay in the main role as a reporting and also should be objective and should be cautious for delivering different opinions. But some people are suggesting that the media need to take an activist approach and doing campaigning and educating people and lead the discussion in the society for tackling the climate change. So I would like to listen to your opinions, how you think for this topic, reporting versus campaigning. That's my suggestion for our discussion.
Thank you very much. Ms. Yunjiro, anything you want to add?
Well, I'd like to answer to the question of Mr. Tang. Well, I don't know if I understood correctly, but I think it's not a matter of choosing one or the other. I mean, as a journalist, from the moment that I decided to write something, my philosophy and my thoughts are already inserted in the decision. So, I mean, we just don't write articles for nothing. We write articles for some reason. So I think it's not a matter of choosing. I mean, it's not as obvious as like campaign of environmental activists, but the objectives are already in the article. So I think it's not a matter of choosing between one and the other. I think it's a matter of finding out a balance between an activist and reporting approach.
Yes, please.
Hello? Yes. Let me quickly respond to my respectful journalist, Injiro. Yes, you're right that when journalists write on articles, already he or she puts a view on the article, and also she or he has an aim why she or he is writing this article. In that sense, it's more than just reporting. Yes, you are correct. But when I say the campaigning, whether the major media in the society need to invest enough resources to exclusively cover the topic of the climate change and also analyze the dynamics of the politics and society and find out where this particular media can make a difference, For example, in case of The Guardian, they wanted to make a difference to push some of the largest foundations in the world to commit to invest in, not invest in the fossil fuels. So that they has a special aim. They had the resources. They invested a lot of people in there. They had an exclusive corner for that, and they covered that for many, many months and years. That's what I meant by campaigning. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Now we are moving on to Mr. Angel Galindo. Mr. Galindo, can you hear us?
Hi, sorry. I would like just to express quickly that I consider that it's necessary not only focus on say to everybody that the climate change or the global warming are real issues, but also focus in how every society of the world can deal with the topic. Like I told you in my presentation, I'm going to be quickly. You can't say to middle class people from a Latin American city, hey, go to public transport, don't use your car, because in your public transport you can be robbed, you can be victim of a crime. Then if there is not a balance about how the politicians can offer you security in how to use the public transport, how, for instance, can be cheaper to buy an electric car than a fossil car. If there are not that guarantees, then it's impossible to achieve the goal. And we have to be clear that one idea is the expectation that everybody has, and another is the reality that different people and different society lives. And I speak only from the situation in Latin America because all the continent is a copy in everything, in corruption, in crime, violence, and those issues for many people are more important than the climate change. And if we don't deal the society, the social level at the same time that the ecological level, then we are not going to achieve a real objective. That is just the idea that I want to express. We need to deal with the social level, and ecological level, and even economical level together. And sometimes there are companies that invest money in projects, and we have to help them to promote those projects. That is all the idea that I want to say. I'm sorry if I interrupt to somebody. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kubanichbak Tibaliyev, do you have something to add?
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to point two things in this session. First, all presentations were excellent, and each one tried to express their view on climate changes and all consequences of bad situation. And the presentations, we can hear that around the world, many problems we have met, and we need to do something together. I mean, journalists, associations with society in each country where the climate change is very strong. For instance, it was for me very interesting to know the situation in Vietnam, in Singapore, in Georgia. Besides, we have internet connections. We could not read properly about the situations there. And vice versa, I believe that situation in Central Asia is not well known around the world. And if you will, if you would pay the attention to Central Asian region, it's a huge region with massive of disasters in wild world, and as I mentioned, Aral Sea almost disappeared, and many people suffered of these consequences. And second, as I read in chat, many people would like to continue communications with each other to maybe share their view how they could manage and how they could educate people to make right decisions to save climate, to save their nature. And I would like to Korean Journalists Association to create some maybe WhatsApp group or Zoom group, and sometimes not regularly, but sometimes when will happen some interesting stories or very important stories, to jointly try to cover and to produce common view, common policy, how to react on the situation. I think it's very important, and will lead to well-educated all society's members how to save our nature and less impact negatively to climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Mbika Gulati, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
So what I would like to say that I have noticed that the younger generation is very interested in saving the climate, and they have more, they're more keen. So students and kids come together and they do garbage collection campaigns, and then Facebook groups have formed. There are birding groups, there are photo walks, there are walking groups on how people are getting educated on trees and flowers and flora, fauna of their region. So as journalists, I feel we should also be highlighting these kind of things, because we might not get a straightforward response on the bigger issues with policymakers or governments, but highlighting the citizens and getting them involved with the real stuff, like going with them, seeing the kind of work they do. And even if we put, a regular coverage, say every 2 to 3 days on a small story, maybe not a big story, we could probably do far more than trying to do bigger stories and just ignoring these smaller gestures that the citizens are doing.
Thank you. We will get back to Ms. Sabina. Are you back online?
Yes. Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you last time. Yes. Yeah. Quick couple of points. In fact, our colleague here who spoke about having a debate on activism or just journalism, and I'd like to share with the participants that the International Federation of Journalists, which really speaks for journalists' rights, press freedom, and all, has set up an expert group on how to tackle climate crisis. So this very much, I think, answers his question that you do more than what you're doing, not just reportage. So the IFJ has set up this particular climate crisis experts group, which has two points on its agenda. One is how it can, the steps it can take to reduce the ecological footprint. And the second one, which is more important, is that taking action to improve the media coverage and unions' response. Unions and associations, like we've just heard our friend from Singapore, who said that they formed an association. But the question is, there was this realization that there is a need for an association, but however, funding is not there. So I think the fact that we are having this session reiterates that climate change, climate crisis has become a priority. And I couldn't agree more with Ambika, my colleague from India, because what is interesting is in my younger days, when I was working in the Times of India, environment was never even considered. It was never even an issue. And if a colleague was interested in it, we journalists who were very politically savvy would just scoff at it. And I think times have changed. So my suggestion, and the younger generation, yes, is looking into it. So I've put the question on activism, where we as associations and we as unions and we as members of the media can, very much play our role, not just by reportage, but being part and parcel of campaigns which are undertaken by these organizations. And last but not the least, a small little suggestion, perhaps, I mean, after this conference, maybe you could make an appeal, maybe the conference could make an appeal to all media houses and all media outlets that perhaps they could consider having an environment watch column in their, whether it's the newspaper, whether it's the digital media, to have a column dedicated to environment, because that's how we really are going to, carry out our responsibility of public service.
Thank you
Those were
very,
my
very
comments.
much. Last but not least, we have Mr. Ashraf.
Thank you. I started my comment by relating climate and sports. And I depended on the most popular sports in the world were football, cricket, tennis, and so on. And they were billions who are fans for these sports. My question was, how can we drag those billions or even hundreds of millions to love global climate issues, to be interested in them, following their news and concerning about the consequences of failure in solving these issues? The answer would be to create a new sport and to get people becoming connected with. I will observe the same from a journalistic point of view. First, people must know that climate issues are totally related to their own lives. Climate is directly connected to people. Journalists must bring examples on how much the global climate issues are related to the pollution of water, the shortage of crops, the cut of roads, the destruction of houses, even losing lives due to many global climate disasters. Second, we journalists give priority to the way giving climate coverage and relating inputs, temperature, wind speed, rains, humidity, and so on, to the outputs of safety, security, availability of services, and so on. So a sport game could be cancelled or delayed because of temperature or because of climate change. A match broadcasting might be disconnected. Billions of fans need to know that they are in the ultimate hands of climate, and a super relationship is really held between the two parties. Third, in news, the climate conditions must be leading. In newspapers, they should come in front pages, not hidden. A gradual reminder of climate broadcast is actually shown on TV. Can we create short stories of 30 seconds on climate? Can we add in every bulletin a definition of one of the climate issues vocabulary? Fourth and last, to accelerate the movement against racism, sports and sportsmen and women can bring slogans on their t-shirts like "No room for racism." Yes, it is true. Can we add "No space for pollution"? No place for crimes against ozone, keep planet green. It is a process that could be established by campaigns to help protecting the planet. Knowledge is needed to enable journalists doing such a job in a perfect way. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we are going to wrap up the second and final day of the World Journalists Conference 2021. We thank you for participating in this year's event. I hope you all stay safe until hopefully we see one another next year in person here in Seoul. Before you leave, we will have a photo session. President Kim and speakers, please stand before the screen for photos. Thank you very much for your time and support.